All right, Perennials and Pollinators Day. You got the right class, right Saturday.
Yep.
Everybody came here to talk about bees and flowers, pistils and stamens. No, I'm just kidding. So we'll have some fun doing perennials today. This is one of my favorites. I like the butterfly garden, the hummingbird garden, kind of all the above. We'll do some shade, some sun, but really talk about stuff that's going to bloom a long time over the summer. And if we give it the right spot, the right location, the right attention, these are things that will come back and say hello year after year after year and not just disappear like our annuals do. So I certainly use some annuals in my garden, in the ground, window boxes, pots, just like everybody does, but it seems like more and more every year I try to find the perennials that will give me the same kind of flower power that I don't have to go buy a new one every year. So there are some great perennials and they keep coming through. Of course, with the class, we've had perennials on special, 20% off. After class, you go shopping, you're going to get 30% off for coming down to the class today. So that's a nice discount, kind of as a reward for the class. I'll remind you at the end too. But thanks for coming. You can see up there, I'm Trevor. Who's new to classes here? We got anybody new today? Oh, nice. Welcome. We got quite a few. Appreciate you coming down. I'll be gone here a couple of weeks. I'm an old dad. I'm taking my young sons hiking down the redwoods and Crater Lake here for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back late in the month. And the one perennial we won't talk much about today is grasses. I love ornamental grasses, but I have a specific class for that coming up right when I get back. So the last Saturday in August, we'll do fall perennials, grasses, and kind of head on to the autumn season, as they would say. So thanks for coming. Everybody's got the handout there, some light bedtime reading for the nightstand. I probably write too much on there like usual. This one's not too bad. But there is a lot of plants on there. I brought a little jungle up that I can look over. We'll probably have some bees come and say hi here during the class with the flowers. But brought a few things in the show. We'll look at a whole bunch of pictures to kind of hopefully give you some ideas. Now, if we talk some basics about perennials, again, these are things that come back year after year after year. We're not annual. Sometimes, does anyone know the word biennial? That's a kind of a different type of plant too. We have to be careful of. They are perennials, but maybe the most common one up here would be foxglove, something that grows not native here, although it seems like it because it's from England, but it's everywhere in our woods. But that has to drop its seed after 2 years to make new plants, if that makes sense. I can't just cut the flowers off every year. My foxglove would disappear because it would only last for 2 seasons. So when we're talking about perennials, we're talking about, again, lifelong plants that will come back every season, and as long as we take care of them the right way. Look at your sun locations is always huge. I'm all about getting the right plant in the right place, so we want to make sure we got some sun for sun, shade for shade. We have lots of those kind of part sun, part shade spots in our yards. It tends to be a common Washington issue, so we can do, I would call it part sun, part shade, half day one way or another. If that half day is in the afternoon, I'm going to lean towards full sun material. If it's in the morning, I'm going to lean towards a little bit more shade. If I've got that under the tree, everybody's got under the tree garden that's a little drier, we would do some dry stuff mainly for shade. I'll do it that way as well. Big thing up here is watch the drainage. I live right in Everett. I'm no different than all of you, whether you're blessed with this pure sand of the other side of Marysville or the nice rocky glacier dinosaur eggs my 8-year-old calls it. That's Everett to me. I live in Glacier View. We call it Glacial Till neighborhood. But I have to fix the drainage. A lot of this stuff, particularly the long blooming things, the salvias, the hyssops, a lot of the fun ones I like to use, we can't be too wet in the winter or that's going to rot out, and then I'll have to replace it again come springtime. So it's not the cold. Typically up here it's usually the wet. Big thing with me is, I'm kind of an OCD gardener. I always say that as a disclaimer. I like my little clumps. I like my compost in between. I'm not as much of a jungle guy. I like it neat and tidy. I'm trying to break my mold of some areas here and break out of my shell, but I tend to go for a lot of things that clump. I put the plant in right here, the clump gets larger every year, but I'm not going to spread and pop up here and run and pop up here. So that's a clumping type, and certainly other gardeners love things that naturalize. If I had more room, maybe I would want my perennials to just kind of find their way and intermix amongst each other and have it naturalize. Either way is fine, but we'll certainly see some plants for each. I'm not a huge plant stake guy. You know, if I look at my butterfly garden right now, I've got some tall things in there. I've got the sunflower staked. I've got a couple things staked, but I don't want to stake in a cage on every single perennial. So I look for things maybe that are a little sturdier, more compact. You may like a little height, you know, depending on where the garden is, but certainly look at that. This is the time of year when you're going to see stuff start flopping. You know, if we don't get a stake on it, a ring, a cage, something, nothing worse than having the blooms just start coming out here to enjoy through fall, and then we bend over and crash and break and we have to start over again. So my 7-foot false sunflower just about did that last week, but I got a string on it just in time. So consider deadheading. You know, I don't walk around every day. I'm not quite that OCD, but probably once a week or every 2 weeks, you know, I get the little dram snips out and I get my bucket and I walk around the yard and it's deadhead some annuals, but also perennials. If I go through and deadhead a lot of this material, any plant is going to want to go to seed. If I'm a perennial, I bloom, I want to reproduce myself, I go to seed, I dry, I drop my seed, and off we go. That's certainly not the end of the world. I want a lot of my stuff to do that, but maybe not quite this early. So a lot of those first blooms will get deadheaded, because if I can cut my delphinium back or whatever plant we're talking about, I'm going to get another flower bud. That perennial will tend to try to reproduce itself again, so I can get a little longer a season of bloom that way. So a little deadheading is great. I look for drought tolerance. I'm not a huge water guy. You know, I water my yard very infrequently. There's certain things that we have to water more than others. I know that as well as you. But certainly I look for a lot of drought stuff, especially on my banks, my slopes, my sunny gardens, so we don't have to water quite as much. So there's quite a bit of drought tolerance. One funny word I'll bring up is temperennial, which I'm not sure if that's really a plant type yet, but I hear that word more and more at our grower level and from customers, frankly, reading in local magazines and things. That's kind of getting thrown out there. You know, what would I call a temperennial? We're part of that zone denial discussion, if you ask me. So something that's right on the hardy line. If we get lucky, we don't have a cold winter, we got great drainage, it probably comes back. But on a typical winter, I would say those things would be annuals in my book for the most part. So if maybe we think of a common thing, who's growing salvias in here? I don't know how many hundreds of hot lip salvia we sell a year. I have one, I have other salvias like that. So what happened to your salvia last winter? You know, mine's done. I have 5-6 years, awesome, that's the best it's done so far. But we got just cold enough that a lot of those plants did die out. That is the poster child to me for a temperennial, you know, something right on that zone 7B, zone 8, that yeah, if we don't, you know, get mild winter, something in the mid-20s, probably not a problem. But anything, I got 7 twice at my house last winter, and those types of things did get nipped quite a bit. So keep that in mind as you're looking at stuff. I mean, salvias are incredible. I would plant one every year as an annual. I could care less because it blooms so long, so much, makes the bees and the hummingbirds so happy. I'm good with that. You can have my $15 a year and I'll plant another one. But you know, that may not be it for everybody. So keep that in mind as you're making some choices, and maybe that word temperennial might say, okay, I think I'll go with something a little easier, a little hardier, try it through, okay? My big thing this time of year is help out the bees and plant some of these. I'm on the state pollinator task force. We're working on a huge program through our state nursery landscape association. You're going to see Power Up Your Pollinators starting here around here this month, and some huge media attention and things on it, kind of how we can save our bees. So plant perennials along garden borders. You know, everybody's got garden borders. We want something low, tidy, something that'll spread a little bit. You know, I do buy one of something once in a while, but typically I'm trying to grab things in 3s, maybe 5s. I don't need 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I want a nice little swath of 3 of the same thing that's going to make maybe a little more a presentation if I have the room. So consider things in mass. You know, repeating a pattern or kind of swathing stuff together is going to look much sharper in the landscape. You know, everybody will probably have some landscape design classes. That's something I think our customers have talked to us a little bit about. Next year I'll probably have a series of those, just some kind of basic ways to design your own landscape. But a big part of that to me is always that layered look, and it's really easy with perennials. If I'm looking at any garden bed, I've got low, I've got medium, and I've got something a little taller towards the back. So whether we have a focal point, some foundation plantings, and then again something towards the border that's going to give me that typical garden look that I think a lot of homeowners like. You know, if we kind of get that layered, it's really easy to do with the amount of choice on perennials, different heights, different bloom times, different times as well. So always use compost when planting. You know, when I add mulch over that garden when it's done, and if it's already done, I mulch it again the next year. It'll help save water, keep the plants happy, and give you healthier soil. Whether you have that sandy side of town or you're like me and you have the rocky side of the county, compost fixes both. You know, if I have sand, compost will help retain some more moisture so I don't have to water as much in the summer. If I have that clay, rocky soil, that compost will help break that up so that I have better drainage. So compost to me is always the answer either way. And then a good, you know, if you're taking some stuff home today, you know, some good Sure Start fertilizer from E.B. Stone that we carry is a great transplant food. Or frankly, just buy some rose and flower food. That's what I have in my garage that I put on all my perennials at least a couple times a year, sometimes more here in the summer. But that's something you can take home, skip the Sure Start, and just get them going with the rose and flower. Still a great organic, high performance fertilizer. Now think of perennials as three options. So we'll have a couple up here we'll show you that I would call sticks. You know, when we die down in the fall, what does that thing look like? A little dead stick out of the ground. I don't have to step on it that way because I can see it. But if you think of things like coneflowers, rudbeckia, a lot of our typical perennials, it dies down the foliage, but what am I left with in the winter? A little pile of mushy twigs that'll probably rot out over the winter, but at least to me I can see it. I won't step on it. So we have sticks. I call them mushers, or you can think of maybe snot. How's that for a bad one? So we got the hosta, you know, something that just kind of gets melted and turns to snot, and you kind of scrape it up and fling it in the yard waste, and we'll see you again next year kind of thing. Now we have some stuff that's evergreen. You know, there's quite a bit of good perennials that keep its foliage through the winter. A lot of people know hellebores, Christmas rose. I'm a heuchera addict. I think I have two down here in the front. I got foliage color on that all winter. So we do have some evergreen options. It doesn't necessarily have to be I disappear in the winter and I do come back to see you again next year. I always try to feed my perennials once in March, for sure. Coming out of winter, that's typically when I will get some slug bait down around some stuff too that I know might be prone, but I will feed in March. I'll always go back usually mid-June, early July, get a second dose down, especially for the summer bloomers. And then maybe in between, you know, whether, I don't know what kind of fertilizers you folks like, but maybe you use a little Seagrow like I do on my annual baskets. Okay, well, maybe I'll throw a little bit of the extra liquid food on some of those perennials to get them kicking a little more for bloom. So do good doses at least of a granular, maybe a little bit of liquid food in between would be nice. I try to clean up a little bit in fall, and then I definitely clean up in spring. You know, this is always kind of the debate in my brain, being OCD, how clean do I want the yard in the winter? But you like to leave some debris because it turns to mulch, the bugs live there, the hummingbirds have food, we can go on and on. So certainly I don't clean up everything in the fall when it comes to perennials, but I will tidy up, especially the things I know, again, are slug prone or might have insect issues. If I get that old debris out of there and clean it up, I've got a much better chance that Mr. Slug didn't lay his eggs, and I have another 100 of the slugs come out next spring versus the one that left him here in the fall. So do a little cleanup in fall will always help. Two things I will tell you right now. We mentioned temperennials, and again, I'm not saying that salvias aren't hardy, because there's plenty of them that are and plenty of them that do come back, but the two plants that I would never touch in the fall are salvias and hardy fuchsias. You know, if you have either of those plants, they get pretty substantial size. They bloom a long time, from early summer all the way till frost. I think mine was still blooming at Thanksgiving last year in my shade garden, my hardy fuchsia. But I don't want to rush to cut that back, and frankly, I don't touch the wood at all until the next spring. Those are the two plants I played with at my house over the years. Every time I tend to cut them back, and I try it this way, the next year I either kill all the wood because it's not hardened off, and then we have to start from the root system, or I lose the plant, especially with the salvia. So I would wait till, like with those two plants, it might be 1st of April next year. You walk out there, everything's breaking bud, here we go with spring 2024, and I look at that plant, I'll see green all over the wood where it wants to grow. Sweet, now I can get my scissors out, my pruners, cut that back to the height I want to start, and then off we go for another season. I just find with people that do it earlier, you'll probably take a little greater chance of losing those two particular plants. Then again, you'll see the slugs there that I mentioned as well. Now, I don't want to spend the whole time at the class here preaching about pesticide use and insecticide use and on and on. I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty, but I think everybody whose gardens and reads the news, the papers, everything, there's a huge push for pollinator health. We don't have bees, we don't have food, we don't have vegetable garden, we don't have berries, we don't have fruits. I can go on and on. So whatever you can do in your little niche of the world to kind of help the bees is going to be a huge help to everybody. So try to make it a pollinator friendly garden. If we have plants that bloom, bees are always going to find them. Hummingbirds are going to find things, butterflies are going to find things. There's a lot of ways to get them into your yard, but I think some simple garden practices will probably help you as well. We want to provide nectar, pollen, seeds, all that stuff. That'll keep all of our native birds, all of our pollinators extremely happy during the season. Use organic products. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to get systemics ever, because that's what travels into every part of that plant. The systemic goes into the flower, the pollen, every part of it. So when the bee comes down, the bee gets insecticide in it, and we lose our bees. They call them neonics. There was a huge crave probably 20 years ago of basically nicotine. Tobacco is a great insecticide, and it's this core, but man tweaked it and made chemical versions of it, which they find are extremely damaging to the bee population. So I'll speak for us. We don't use any of that stuff around here. Our growers don't use any of that stuff, which someone will ask at some point, I'm sure. So we avoid all that stuff like the plague. It's up to you to do it at your yard. And again, I'm not trying to preach to you, but the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of people I talk to make the right choice. Use neem oil, use insecticidal soap, all the great sprays, but you do it at the wrong time, I hate to tell you. So it doesn't matter if I pick the safest thing in the world, neem oil or insecticidal soap or whatever it is. If I go out and spray my plant at noon when there's bees all over the blossoms, I've killed all those bees just the same as I have as if I use systemic. So part of it is, to me, for the pollinator health, having great plants, nice diversity of stuff to keep all of our things happy. Taking care of them organically is a huge part of it. But when you do spray or have to spray, doing it at the right time. So get up early in the morning, do it late in the evening when those bees aren't active. Try to avoid spraying stuff in bloom, which is not easy in the summer. It's very easy to do, I think, in the spring, the winter, the fall, the different seasons. But certainly in the summer, just be a little more careful with the timing. Then we don't get that neem oil on a plant that you're going to hurt, again, one of those pollinators. Okay? So if we look at some plants here, we'll get crash course here with way too many perennials, and I'll show you a few. We've got a lot out there, and there's more comes every week. This is not a plant that we let disappear here for the summer or the fall, any time of the year. There's not as much around the winter, a lot of evergreen perennials, but we do carry a lot, and we will continue to all the way through fall. So there'll be more deliveries next week as we restock things week to week to week. So I'll show you a few: agastache, agastaki, hyssop, hummingbird mint. That one's got quite a few names. That's one of my personal favorites because I think it smells delicious. It's got a herby smell, real kind of minty. There's an orangey one, I think, up here on the deck here, on the bench here somewhere. But hyssop loves drought, loves dry, easy to grow. You've got good drainage, super hardy. We just want to make sure it's not too wet. That's the only thing that's going to crash out hyssop, is if we have bad drainage, clay, too wet, or we overwater. Certainly that's something I just added a new one in my yard. I hardly touched it more than once or twice a week, a little drink here and there to keep it going. Down the road I won't have to do much of that at all during the summer months. So hyssop, really long season of bloom, a lot of different options for color, and that's a great hummingbird plant as well as all other pollinators too. Asclepias, they call butterfly weed. Everybody who reads the paper comes in and asks for something to feed the monarch butterflies. We don't have monarch butterflies here, I hate to tell you that. The tiger swallowtails look very close, but it's not quite the same. But it really, to me, doesn't matter because you're still doing the right thing. Just because I don't have Asclepias, milkweed, that the butterfly is going to come nest on, it still doesn't matter. I've got pollen, I've got nectar, I've got flowers. I'm going to keep the pollinators happy using butterfly weed. I just don't want you to think you're providing nature a great service with a home for the monarch butterfly cocoons, because we just don't have them here. So there's other native things that our native butterflies will use. Lots of asters. There's one right here in front of me starting to bloom. But asters is one as we get into late summer here. That's got my flower power here, August, September, October. So that's going to give me a little late summer color. We can do pinks, lavenders, whites. There's quite a few different species of aster out there. Certainly a favorite of the bees. You know, when those things bloom, you got bees buzzing all over the asters, and we do have quite a bit of those in. Coneflowers is getting overwhelming. I'll speak for me. I don't know how many coneflowers I have in my yard, and I bought another one this year for some reason. But there is a lot of choice. I think the biggest thing probably with coneflowers is, you know, do I personally like the double ones? I think they kind of look like abomination of nature, to be honest with you. So I don't do the doubles, but they're very cool. I think a lot of people like those. I'd stick with traditional coneflower, but they get bred and bred and bred, and all that's giving to you is more color choice. I think you're going to see huge contrast in a lot of the actual cones to the flower, multicolored flowers. You certainly got some fun double ones out there. A lot of multicolored ones now that might bloom different shades as they go through flower. But coneflower is an easy plant. You know, again, a long blooming plant, clumping, loves sun, drought tolerant, and that's one I certainly would look at. Maybe in threes, you know, or one big tall one with something around it. We can find a lot of compact coneflowers. A lot of other ones might even need a stake. I've got a couple taller ones that I do need to watch so they don't flop a little bit here late summer. But certainly to me, almost the power of an annual bloomer as far as the repeat flowering through the summer with the modern coneflowers, but a really cool perennial and really easy to grow. I'm kind of the same with Coreopsis. I've got one of those, I think, out in front here, the yellow. Yeah, there's one on the bench right there. The Coreopsis to me is the same way. That's an annual to me that's a perennial, because that thing blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms some more. So if I do a tiny little bit of deadheading, that's a plant that will just keep sending flower up, and you'll have flower all from June all the way till frost in the fall. So lots of threadleaf ones, or bigger shaped flowers like that one there. I think that's Golden Sphere, but there's quite a few good Coreopsis around. If you like the bright yellows, oranges, reds, there are some pinks and whites in there too, but that's usually typically an orange, red, yellow kind of color. The delphinium here is staring in my face, Mr. Larkspur. I would say that's a huge difference between me growing up in the garden with my mother and my grandmother. The old tall delphiniums, you had to put 8 stakes on so the flowers didn't break. Now there's so many good ones that just don't get very tall. You can have that same showy flower, but on a really nice compact plant. So we do still have some delphiniums. That's a sweet little plant for the cottage garden. Another one of my favorites, I probably have more of these than anything, probably more than coneflower, is blanket flowers, Gaillardia. Has anyone tried any of those? So that to me is a great one to naturalize. That's the one I probably broke out of my OCD mold with first, because I plant blanket flowers. They're a great long season bloomer all the way till frost. They're low, they're great for those borders. You know, plant a couple of them, let them go to seed a little bit. You'll have a beautiful patch of them. Again, reds, oranges, yellows, kind of my favorite colors too. But a really easy plant for drought, low, hot sun. And that's kind of a wildflower out of some of the mountain areas down the southwest. So as long as we've got good drainage and good sun, that's a plant you'll have really easy luck with. You'll see right now, they'll have those, if anyone has Gaillardia, you got a bunch of the little fuzz balls on there. They're kind of fun to touch. They're kind of soft. That's my seed for next year. So if you want my tip with Gaillardia, I OCD on those things here for about 1 more month. All the little dead flowers get cut. Seeds go in the yard waste, more flowers keep coming. Once we get to September, I let them ride, because now I want all those flowers to dry, the seeds to dry, the birds got some protein to forage in the fall, all that seed drops, now I got more plants for next year. So that's an easy one to let reseed. There's a wand flower here somewhere. I brought a little light white pink one, isn't that cute? So a little wand flower, butterfly flower, but that's Gara. So if we were going maybe for something, a little of those have light fragrance a lot of times. Again, hot sun, really good drainage. I killed a couple of Garas before I found a spot that drained well enough. But I do have a couple going now for a few years. And that again, long season of flower. Big spikes come out, open up, and those butterflies absolutely love them, as well as the bees. So that might be something to like if you're a little more pastel flower color versus me on the orange, red, yellow. If you like a little softer white, pinks, Gara might be a great choice for you. Cranesbill geraniums, you know, perennial type geraniums are always really easy to naturalize in kind of that cottage garden. It's one of those plants we can get blue in, which is a different color a lot of times on our perennials. But we look at some of the geraniums out there, Roseanne, Johnson's Blue. We'll have a few different ones out there through the course of the year. That's another one we could easily plant a couple and let that naturalize into a nice patch that's really easy to grow and super hardy. I put sneezeweed, we call it Helen's flower for that helenium. Did anyone read Steve's article here a couple weeks ago? Time for a hellacious summer, I think it was. So he picked out all the Heliopsis, the Helianthemums, the Heleniums, all these HELs. And that really is kind of, I sent him nice work, Steve, when I saw the article, because it is kind of fun. If you look at those plants, this is sunflower and our sunflower relatives. So perennial type things that will give us that look. This is a Helen's flower right here, just starting to bloom. Now those flowers will last about 3 months. Mine's just I have 3 big clumps of this in my own garden, just opening right now here for August. That gives me maximum flower power for that mid-late summer into fall. Those flowers last 3 months before they dry, then we can let them again go to seed, let the birds have those seeds in the fall. In the meantime, that would be probably 100 bees a day for me. Every day I walk out to visit my Helen's flower, covered in bees at nonstop. That's an easy one to keep the pollinators happy with here in late summer. You'll see some a little taller. I've got, we call it sneezeweed, we used to. We don't sneeze when you see it. But I'm about 3 feet. You know, I could have something pretty impressive if I want a big one. I don't have to stake those. I will tell you now, because mine don't fall over. But 3 foot, I can also get some newer compact ones as well. There's more of our hellacious summer plants. I should have put the picture I took. My little guy Max is 8, my younger boy, and he has his own garden now. I'm kind of happy he's taken after me. He likes his gardening time. So he has his own garden with his little dinosaur sculptures in there, of course. But he wanted a sunflower, and I thought, all right, I'm not going to plant sunflower seeds every year, so let's look at a perennial sunflower, buddy. So I brought him down here, and we got him a Lemon Queen 2 years ago. It is 7 feet tall right now. I took his picture standing next to it, and he's all smiling like, look at my cool plant. About a week ago, because it's starting to bloom. But, you know, these are impressive specimen plants. If I pick the right thing, again, I staked that one. It's tied to my cedar fence, otherwise it would be laying over the yard by now because it's so big. But you can get that look like a sunflower, and sunflowers are fine too to throw some seeds in. There's some fun colors on those. But the perennial ones I'll have forever. You know, if I got hot sun, I don't want to water, this is something I'll have as a huge specimen plant that he'll get to enjoy here for years. And the bees and everybody are just going to be happy as can be here all late summer, fall, because now it's just starting to bloom here going into that heat of the summer. So smaller ones certainly, but if you want to go big, you can get a big fall sunflower too. There's some pretty good sized ones. Same with Eupatorium, Jopai weed. That's another big perennial. That would look like a shrub in most people's yards. If you've got an old Jopai weed, you might be 5-6 feet by 5-6 feet. You know, in the summer. Wow, look at that impressive plant. What kind of shrub is that? It's just another perennial. Chop it off of the ground every year and it starts over again. How easy is that? So one pruning instead of 3 a year. But that's certainly one that we can do for sun, a great summer bloomer. Jopai weed will also take a little wet. I want to make sure that's clear because that's not a common thing for a lot of impressive perennials. If I have a little bit of clay, a little wetter in the winter, that might be a better choice for you for a specimen perennial that won't rot out maybe as easy as some of the other things. Catmint probably has nepeta, not catmint, or catmint, not catnip. I want to make sure that's not clear. A different plant. But nepeta probably has the record for the flower time, if you want to ask me. This will give me lavenders, light blues, pinks, whites. and they just bloom and bloom and bloom again. So this is one I see around in a lot of commercial, cityscape, rain garden areas. A lot of things that the cities or people are wanting big impact on a tiny, inexpensive plant. Catmints really do bloom a long time, super drought tolerant, really easy to care for. I think I brought one. Where's the lavender one? Right in the front there. There's a catmint right there in the front.
So
yeah.
That goes down to the ground though in winter?
Go down to the ground in winter, and again, if I just do a little bit of deadheading, that one maybe not as much as others because it tends to bloom on top of itself. But if we do a little bit of tidying in that June, early July time frame, we'll keep those flowers coming and we'll have color all the way through the fall. So really, really easy one to do.
Can you keep it on pots?
That would be a great one for pots. We have a lot of people use those as a mixed, kind of a mixed with perennials and different sun planters for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I helped out, Woodinville did a huge pollinator pathway project in downtown Woodinville where they planted barrels as you walk through different parts of the city and the parks where, again, you can kind of watch the wildlife follow that around, and that was one we used a lot of in the different planters and sun because of, again, the long bloom season and are very attractive to the bees and the pollinators. Lavender is always a great one, and that would be evergreen, probably the difference between that one. If you've tried lavender, again, we want good drainage, we've got drought tolerant, we want easy to go, but a little bit of pruning. That's the one thing I always tell people with lavender. If you're gonna plant lavender, when it's bloomed out, shear it back below the flowers, wait for another bloom, and kind of do that a couple times a year. You'll have big, we call it sequim, I'm here, so I call it squim. But you go over to the lavender festival, what do you see? Huge, big pin cushions. That tile off the ground, they're just covered in flowers. If you don't prune lavender, we get woody, then you look like the lady down the road here I see every day with the white picket fence with 4 feet of wood and a little frosting of lavender flowers on top. So if you want it tall, great. You know, it's your yard, do what you want to do. But if you like that compact, heavy flower, give them a shear after the bloom every time. You'll have much nicer plants. I just added a penstemon. This is the first time I've added a penstemon to my yard this year. I got Little Red Riding Hood. I like the name of that one. But that's a Rocky Mountain type wildflower. Again, if we deadhead these, they'll repeat flower. I deadheaded mine and I'm already seeing some buds starting to come back up, and I'll get more flower on it this late summer, fall. But this is one that we would love for the bees, the hummingbirds again. We can pick a lot of different colors on that. We do have some nice choice on penstemons out there. Perovskia or Russian sage. So anybody got Russian sage? You got a nice big shrub? Yeah, because that's a big plant. You know, Russian sage is one I would plant on the back 40, the hottest, driest spot in your yard, and just walk away, because that's one you can walk away from. So it's super cold hardy, super drought tolerant. That does get a nice bluish, lavenderish flower on it, silverish foliage, nice looking plant, but it is a woody perennial. That's one that we would get bigger and bigger every year. And frankly, another one I would rather have you kind of cut back coming out of winter versus chopping it off in the fall. So you kind of leave that structure for the winter, go out there in March, early April, then we can tidy it back, kind of like the salvias and the fuchsias. And I don't know what it is, maybe, I think my grandmother must have had a sea of these in her yard, but I've always had a soft spot for black-eyed Susans, a pretty common little perennial. I got a whole bunch of them in my yard, a bunch of different patches, because I've just always liked black-eyed Susan. So really easy plant to grow. This is one that will naturalize a little bit. I have to take the spade to the edge of mine every few years and take some pieces off so I can kind of keep it in an area. This one will travel a little bit and turn into a nice patch. The biggest thing to me with black-eyed Susan is now you've got options. It's not the same one we always had. The one I started with, Goldstrom, was always the taller one, a little bit bushier plant. We got dwarf ones now. Little Gold Star's fabulous. American Gold Rush. There's a lot of good cultivars of black-eyed Susan. Might give you a little different look on as well. So there's your salvias. You know, and I put down Hot Lips. I have Fireman Jeff, a red version of that. You know, typically those are hardy. We got cold enough last year that I even killed mine, and I had mine for a lot of years, and actually it didn't really kill it, but I had 2 pieces of wood left that came up and was like, you know what, I'm just gonna get a new one and start over again. So I bought a new one and replaced it. The temperennial ones for sure, your black and blue, your Amistad. We will carry salvias here at Sunnyside literally in 2 different places. If you find it up in our annual seasonal department up there, I wouldn't really count on that coming back reliably. That's going to be zone 8. You get lucky, great. If not, you got a wonderful season of flowers out of it. The hummingbirds were happy and we buy another one next year. If it's out here, meadow sages go down to like 30 below zero, or hot lips, firemen. There's a lot of Texas sage that's plenty hardy up here as long as we don't get a freaky winter. That would be out in our perennial department, maybe as a little more reliable either way, okay? But both those, hot, dry, that's probably one of the top ones out there for we want heat, good drainage, sandy soil, and we don't need to really do a lot of work on those, just let them go. Lots of cool sedums out there. I brought my favorite little one in here. Where's Little Gecko? He just came in. I bought one already. This guy right here. So there's the brand new one this year called Little Gecko. I like the name too. But there's some fun sedums. You know, if you go sedum, again, at the top of the totem pole for drought tolerance, easy care. You got sun, you got banks, you've even got borders that drain really well. Sedum's a great choice to kind of let naturalize and take over. Even as a ground cover, I use a lot of that in my rockery as well. But this is sedum time. I mean, we got 2 full tables out there, a rainbow of color choices for foliage and for flower. But we start to get to July through October, those are sedum months. That's when I'm getting all my flower. This is not a spring thing, typically not even a June thing. There's some that start a little bit earlier, but July, August, September, October, these are the 4 months you'll see flower buds on all the sedums out there getting ready to do their thing. So butterfly favorite, as well as the bees here as we get into summertime. Now a couple I put on here, you'll see the sun sparklers. So before we always had ground cover, right? Lots of choices. Then we had tall, autumn joy, and different ones that maybe got a little taller, fleshier sedums. Sun sparkler is the one in between. So if I want just a little mound of great foliage and flower, I use a lot of sun sparklers now. That's pretty much all I bought here for the last 5-6 years. Different colored ones. There's some great options. There's room for taller ones, certainly. We got a bunch of those in again this week if you need a little height. And then again, ground cover style. I could pick any color in the rainbow for foliage and different flowers and have a really attractive little hot succulent type ground cover using sedums or ice plants, hardy ice plants out there as well. Great flower and minimal water use as well. Now a couple more for sun. Yarrow. Actually just planted my first yarrow this year. I've always enjoyed them at my mom's and I wanted to add one to my butterfly garden, so I added that. I think I got that exact one, actually, a picture there. But that's another butterfly pollinator friendly little perennial that will naturalize really nicely, make a nice addition to a good sunny, well-drained garden. It's got nice ferny kind of gray foliage, a little different foliage than some of the other perennials, so it stands out. But yarrow might be a good choice for you. You'll see those out there blooming here for the time. And one of my faves is the orange one there, Zauschneria. That's just a fun one to say. So that's what we call California fuchsia, and that may not be for everybody. It's down there about zone 6, zone 7, so it's not the temperature that's going to kill it. If it gets too wet, it will. I've got a massive patch of this at my house in Everett, right off my driveway. Reflected heat, don't have to water it much. It's on a slight little slope, so I don't have to worry about wintertime getting too wet. But this is one, again, nice foliage, real low, but those orange trumpet flowers just keep coming day after day after day here, all the way till the end of summer. You can do oranges or reds as well on that, but you'll see a couple of flavors of the Zauschneria out there as well. Then you can say you have A to Z perennials, right? Now just a couple things I'll bring up for shade. You know, as we get into the fall here, anemone time's coming. I brought one in here. You can see the flower buds are just coming out on that anemone. You know, that's one that definitely naturalizes. Anyone got an anemone? You're probably shaking your head like, yeah, I got one and now I got about 50 of them. So if you let those go to seed, they just find their place where they like in your yard and you get to enjoy some for free. So anemones are one, we like that woodland garden, kind of part sun, part shade. As long as we're moist, this is not going to be drought tolerant. This is something we want to make sure stays moist and does not dry out in the summer so that we get our flower power on. You can see beesia there. That's a little evergreen ground cover. Typically won't die back here in the winter for deep dark shade. If you want a little clumpy cool foliage plant, that gets a nice like white flower stalk on it there as we go into this late summer fall. We should have some beesia out there. These are both from my yard here. I love submissifuga. Now they've renamed it, but I refuse to call it Actaeus, so I still call it submissifuga. Sorry. Or you can call it, used to call it snake root, which doesn't make much sense until you see the flower. So submissifuga is a plant that if I give that like half day sun, half day shade, I'm going to have some beautiful purplish foliage, which is really nice. A nice little bit of height. My older plants probably have foliage that far out of the ground, you know, about 2.5, maybe 3 feet on a good year. Then I have those white, fragrant, curvy snake flowers on top of that here late summer. Right now, my buds are just coming out, so this is like an August, September bloomer. But another one that pollinators love. You can do it in shade if you want. You won't get as much foliage color if it's in deep dark shade, but it will grow. But probably a nice little specimen perennial if you're looking for something a little bigger and more attractive maybe than some of the others. The same with the Aurelia. So mine is, I actually had to prune it back last week for the first time since I bought it probably 15 years ago. But mine hit about 6 feet by 6 feet here, and it was at the ground in April. So that's how fast these come up. So Aurelia is all about foliage color. That's got beautiful yellow leaves. These bloom here in September and then get a really pretty little kind of purplish berry on them too, which is kind of nice in the fall. And then we get hard frost. They turn to snot like a hosta, melt, throw them in the yard waste. We'll see you again next year. So Sun King is typically the variety you see around, or Gotemba. Mr. Hinckley, our local plant hunter, introduced that. We've got both out there in our shade area. But I get mine, again, underneath a big old rhododendron, and it's 6 feet up into the rhododendron now. It looks pretty cool in the summer. But I get shade, 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 and then blasted late afternoon. That way I get the bright yellow I want, but I don't have to water as much having all day sun. This could take all day sun if you water, that's fine. But in a typical part sun, part shade garden, probably a little better. And again, a little bit more of a specimen type perennial. Can't do summer class without mentioning hardy fuchsias, and we brought a couple up here. I got a couple in front here. I thought I had a foliage color one. I think he's down in the front. You know, but hardy fuchsias is probably the #1 blooming plant. Everybody buys hardy fuchsias. We carry probably 20, 25 different kinds of these over the course of the summer here. Look at your tag would be my advice, because I know we get a lot of cool ones in, and there's a couple I've wanted to try. Look at the tag. It says Zone 8. I typically, if I buy it, I'm cool with it dying that winter. How's that for honesty? I'm like, okay, if it comes back, great. If not, I won't be upset at Sunnyside, so I'll buy the Zone 8. But if you buy 6 or 7, I don't think you'll ever lose them. I have a Zone 7. Again, we got 7 degrees twice at my place in December, and mine died to the ground, and it's already up a foot off the root system and blooming here in summer. So if I had a Zone 8, I don't think it would have come back this year, and mine's even in a big pot, which is even a little less hardy. So, but again, the trick with hardy fuchsia, don't cut it back till spring. Don't do this in the fall. Leave it alone. Walk out there April. It'll tell you when it's ready to go. Now we can cut that wood back, and then off we go for another season. And this is the one perennial that I feed with Seagrow. We sell Seagrow here kind of as a nice hybrid organic liquid food. I feed that every time I water my baskets, window boxes, and fertilize every couple weeks. I do my hardy fuchsias as well, because that I'm going for maximum flower power on. Okay, so you'll see on the one there, which I thought I brought one up. Maybe she didn't bring me the foliage color one, but we do have some that have gold leaves. That's the one I chose. You know, I was like, sweet, I got a cool flower, but I also got some nice foliage on it. So we can do green leaf or gold leaf. And then we can pick any color sepal and corolla you want. You're gonna find it out there. I want white with purple, pink with red, red with white. Pick whichever you want. You're gonna find one out there blooming, and they are all in full bloom right now. So lots of hosta. You know, we don't have the huge hosta selection like we had maybe in May, June, but we still got some really good ones down there. We've been getting some fresh hostas in. You know, this is maybe a common perennial I think a lot of people know of and use. Not all of them are slug prone. You can keep the slugs out of them. That's usually what I hear. I don't get a lot of slug damage on mine, but I get slug bait down early. This is kind of, to me, you know, your taste plant. What do you like? You like yellow, you like green, you want some white, you like blue, big leaf, small leaf, tiny, gigantic. You could pick anything you want with hosta. There's a few hostas that'll get like 4 feet tall and 6 feet across if you want a shrub, you know, or we can get little miniature ones like mouse ears I've had for years, and I might get 4 inches tall and 8 inches wide in the whole season. So there's a lot of choice with hostas. Here at Sunnyside, we try to go back 25 years when we have our hostas in for the year, and we carry the hosta of the year going back 25 years every single season. So we get a huge selection here, I think, and I think Monrovia produces a superior hosta plant. So we get the majority of ours from them. I think their plants are really good, chunky, old plants per gallon, and again, still some great choices down there. Hostas will take a little more sun than you probably think. Certain ones especially. B, they're very drought tolerant. That's a plant that I don't think a lot of people look at and think, well, that takes drought, really? The hostas will take quite a bit of drought. That's one you don't have to water a whole lot once those are going. So I would also look at it for those locations. And again, I've got hostas probably every nook and cranny in my yard. I like hostas quite a bit. I've got one here, and there's 3 over here, and another one here and there. Use them to tie the garden together, because if you like yellows or blues or whatever color you like, you can really kind of tie different parts, I think, of your garden with design together with some really nice clumps of different hostas in there. Right now they're just blooming. A lot of them will be fragrant. Typically we have white or lavender flower depending on. The big stalk comes out of that clump and I get to enjoy the flower. The hummingbirds visit them all the time. Bees will certainly like them as well. But something here for that July, August, September is kind of prime time for hosta flowers. A couple last ones here. We got saxifrage. So I've added quite a few of these the last few years because now our saxifrage has gone from let me see you bloom for like 6 weeks to let me see you bloom for like 6 months. So that's why I kind of go, all right, I'm going to give some saxifrage a try, because I was always like, yeah, it doesn't last long enough in flower. So a lot of these new types, a lot of these new types will bloom a very long time. So this is something that opens up in my yard in April and goes through the majority of the summer. So I have kind of that spring through summer bloom versus the old saxifrage, a little flash of flower here, a little bit there kind of thing. And some nice foliage ones in there as well. So Thalictrum or meadow rue is another one I use in my shade garden. Got great fragrance, maybe a little bit more height if you're looking for something a little taller. These ones just finished blooming in my yard, so this was like a June, July kind of time frame. Typically purples and lavenders are the colors, but again, nice pleasing fragrance on a lot of them. And a pretty cool plant. Looks a little like columbine maybe if you haven't tried one. The foliage does, but totally different flower and a totally different scale for height as well. The last couple here are just some evergreen things. So we talked at the beginning, you know, the nature of a perennial is I grow up in the spring, I bloom my hearts away, I reproduce myself, I go to bed for the winter, I go to say hello again next spring. The evergreen ones will follow that same sequence, but in the winter I would also keep the foliage. So I don't go totally dormant, totally dead in the winter. I still got the color if I want something that's a little more like a shrub that would give me some winter interest. So euphorbia is always a really easy one. I think I brought a rainbow, Ascot rainbow up there. I think it's on the bench down in front. Yeah. But those are ones that will bloom coming out of winter. That's one I could care less of even flowers, to be honest with you. It's got attractive foliage, super drought tolerant, super hot loving, and something I can plant and almost have like a small shrub versus a typical perennial. We got different ferns, you know, evergreen ferns we can use in our shade garden. And again, a lot of ferns are a little more drought tolerant than you think you will. If you look up fern, you'll see some of our native stuff, deer fern, sword fern, that kind of things. We have dry summers, that hasn't changed. Maybe we're extra dry this year and we started a little early, but they still don't need a lot of summer maintenance or natural rain. They thrive in our native woods. And a lot of those will keep their fronds in the winter. They add a little interest again. And then a lot of cool perennial ferns, ones that maybe a little foliage color, some different things that I can use in my shade garden to get some interesting texture and still have a nice hardy perennial that will come back every season. It's not the time for hellebores, but I always bring those up because that's an easy evergreen perennial for shade, or especially dry shade, that would keep its leaves, bloom a long time. This is one that comes more like December, January through April, May. So we do have a lot in right now, but this is something you want to come shop for in the fall when you've got all the new choices every year. There's always a zillion hellebores or Christmas rose around. And then the last one, you know, I have heucheritis. That's the addiction to all things heuchera. It's contagious, so you probably don't want to come up after class or you might get it too. No, I'm just kidding. But heuchera, I've always loved because I think, A, they've got some sharp flowers. The hummingbirds absolutely love the flowers on them, and the bees. I love foliage colors, so even if they didn't bloom, I would still like heucheras because I can put some purple here and some orange here and some lime here, some red here. We can do all those colors in the rainbow. You'll see a big table outside there for sun, and then a separate table in our shade area for shade. So if you get the right heuchera in the right place, you're going to have a nice, easy, evergreen clumping perennial that will keep blooming. You keep deadheading the flowers, they keep coming all year. And that's like an 8-month bloomer, plus having the foliage. They're great in pots as well. That's usually how I feed my addiction, if I can speak to the crowd. So I have heucheritis because I can't say no. I buy a new one every year. My wife will get mad, so I don't add it in the garden. But honey, it's for the container garden. So I use it in the container for a year, then I can move it in the garden and go buy another heuchera to put in the pot. So it's easy to kind of sneak heucheras in. They're really easy to divide, and then to me they just get better with age. There's some that we don't carry anymore because I'm usually the heuchera test garden in Everett. So I'm like, yeah, that one gets too much rust. Don't carry that anymore. We got a better color. Do this one instead. So we try to stay away from the ones that you got to mess with and pamper so much, but try to get tried and true, easy ones that will give you the thing. The biggest thing, like I said, is that sun versus shade. Shade goes in shade, sun goes in sun. If I put that in shade, I'm probably going to get rust. It's not going to have the color I like, and that's going to get sunburn if I put it out in sun because they like a little more dappled light. So get the right one for the right spot. Excuse me, you'll have great looking heucheras all through the season. Someone inevitably asked me, like, well, how do yours always look so nice? So I have a 3-year program, I call it. So they're marked on my calendar because I am OCD. But every 3 years, one variety gets pulled up real quick in the winter, chopped up, divided, replanted. My neighbor gets some, the arboretum gets some. Usually my mom or somebody else gets some, and then we're back to the way we were before. Cutting them back is key. I want my heucheras looking the best in the winter. It's my main time because everything else is gone. The perennials have died to the ground. My sticks, my mushers, all those funny words we use. So what's left? A shrub, conifer, this. Oh, and I got some heucheras. So I have some color. So I usually go out in August is when I'm in there pulling out spent leaves and cleaning them up real quick because you'll see new foliage coming up non-stop. So I'll leave that. Now it comes up in the fall. I got a great looking plant all winter. Then in March, I walk out and do the same thing. So it's a quick 2 little, prune a few leaves, cut some old flowers out twice a year, and I really have nice looking heucheras year round. If I walk away, they're gonna get crowded. You're probably gonna have flower stalks hanging. You're gonna be like, I don't know if I like heucheras so much. Give them a little bit of tidying up once or twice real quick. It won't take you very long. And certainly dividing, you know, you pay 16 bucks for one, let it grow for a year. You could probably make 12 plants out of that in 2 years. Just by dividing them, pulling them apart carefully, popping them back in, and you've got yourself your own heuchera patch. And I won't tell anybody that you propagated them, right? There you go. So there's a little crash course perennials.